Hi friends, it's Chari. Today I am going to be playing with lots of different watercolor mediums. I really had fun playing on this card and there was a lot to show, so let's get started. First off, I'm going to show you that this is the watercolor paper I will be using for all of my watercolor techniques today. I took one sheet and cut it down into 4 panels. These panels are 4.5 inches by 6, so they are a little bigger than my dies or my card base. I'll show you here. This is going to give me some room to kind of go off the edges, and then I will die cut my piece after I'm finished doing my watercoloring. So this first piece I'll cut with that flower garden backdrop, and I'm going to be using the Corinne Brush Marker Pros, and you can see that I have picked out a rainbow of colors. I have 7 different colors here, and I am just going to start by putting this marker right down onto the paper. I'm starting at the bottom with the yellow, the green, and that teal color. And I'm also going to scribble some onto my glass mat here so that if I feel like I need a little more color, I can pick that up with my watercolor brush. I also have a little jar of some clean water and just a watercolor brush. Any size will do. I'm not even sure what size this one is. And then I'm just picking up some water and taking it directly to the paper to blend out that marker that I scribbled onto the paper. And I like this really bright but loose watercolor look. And you can see how those colors blend nicely together. Now I'm going to work my way up the sides with an orange and a pinky red. And then on the other side, I will add that blue color and the purple. Now, I did not go all the way around, and you will see later when I cut out my flower garden backdrop that I do go in and finish off the very top of the frame. I had thought that I would add a die cut frame to the outside, but I liked that color going all the way to the edge, so I did have to change that up a little bit and fix that, but it was really easy to do with these markers. So just like I did with the colors at the bottom, I'm just bringing my clean water to my paper and moving that color from the marker around. And when I need to, I can pick up that extra marker that I scribbled on to my glass mat. Now I do have a big blob of that purple kind of moving there, but I am going to fix that. And then I will set this aside to dry. I wanted to check to make sure I have pulled that color in far enough to where it will completely cover my die cut. And now I'm just playing a little bit more and blending my colors together. I do keep pushing it down because my paper is bowing a little bit, and that is what is causing that water to move and get those big splotches. But I'm going to speed this up a little bit and use my Ranger Heat tool to dry that quickly. And you want to make sure that this is completely dry before we die cut it. So now I can take my flower garden backdrop die and line that up and run this through my die cut machine, and I'm going to get this beautiful rainbow flower backdrop with the white at the top, but I will fix that here in a little bit as I said before. Now for my background, I wanted to play with my Distress watercolor pencils. I know that Jen really loves these and I have taken a class with her, but I haven't really used them on any projects. And I thought it would be fun to use these in conjunction with the cloudy stencil to create a cloudy background. I know we're normally using our stencil with our inks and ink blending, but I thought that this would be fun to just trace the edge of it with the pencil and then blend it out with the water. So the color I have picked here is peacock feathers, and you can see I'm just tracing my clouds. Then I will move my stencil, shift it down, turn it to get a different cloud design, and then trace it again. And I did this all the way down my piece of watercolor paper. As I said before, this is the same paper that I showed at the beginning. This is just another quarter sheet that I've cut down, and I will trim this once I'm done with all of my watercoloring. So now I'm going to take a smaller brush, get a little bit of that water, and I'm going right along that pencil line and getting that pigment wet so it will move around. And you can see how that kind of blends out that line. Then what I did was I kept grabbing my water so that I could make that whole section from the line of the clouds to the top blue. And I can grab a little more color directly from my pencil when I want to add a little bit more, and then just add more water to make it a little bit lighter. But this will keep me from having any hard line where the paper is stark white and then we have that light blue. I can also dry it between layers if I need to, but I found that I didn't really need to do that if I was careful where I put my water. So I'm speeding this up a little bit, but I wanted to show you the whole process of doing all of these lines because I did try a few different things. You can see when I pick up that color from the pencil, it gets pretty dark and you just need to add more water to blend it out. And I took it all the way up to the line of the clouds above. And I could see when I didn't quite meet that line because I had a really white area. Now for this one, I tried something a little bit different. I went ahead and added a little more pencil, and you can see how this one ended up being a bit darker than the ones before. So for this one, I added the pencil to the paper when it was dry, unlike the others where I was grabbing it from my pencil after I had already put water onto the paper. But it kind of blended out to be the same. So you could add the pencil at the beginning or as you go. For this one, I'm back to just doing as I did before and picking up that color from my pencil and then adding water to blend it back out to that very light color. And I like how this gives the clouds kind of a softer look. My paper was getting really wet and kind of warped, so I went ahead and dried it a little bit before moving on to my last bit of clouds at the bottom. Now, I didn't take these all the way to the bottom of the paper because I know I'm going to be covering up the bottom of this panel with the flower garden and also a green hill for my little critters to stand on. So this is what that's looking like, and I decided to go in and add a little more color. Now this is the Salvage Patina Distress Watercolor Pencil. My paper is completely dry right now, and I'm just being very light-handed to kind of add some little shading shadows in there. And these actually looked really good just as they were, but I did go back in with the water and blend it out and make it look more watercolor. This could be a really fun thing to kind of mix watercolor and pencil and use regular colored pencils as well if you did not want to blend it out with the water. You can see I'm adding just a little bit of water just to kind of soften up those pencil strokes a little bit. This is very subtle, but it really looked good and added some more shading to the clouds. Like I said, I really had fun playing on this card using some techniques that I don't use very often. So now that this is dry and looking the way I want, I'm going to trim this down to a 4¼ by 5½ inch panel so that it will fit behind my flower garden backdrop perfectly. You can see that that looks really cute there. Now here is where I decided that I did not want to put a white frame around this, that I liked the rainbow going all the way to the edges. So I'm just taking those same markers that I used to do my purple and my red, adding a little bit to the top, and then I'll just blend it into the part that was already colored. So once I have this looking pretty good and blended in, I will just set this aside to dry and move on to my little critters. Now I wanted to make a special couple combining a cat and a dog. I am going to use my Distress watercolor pencils, so I will stamp these in jet black ink onto that same watercolor paper, and I'm going to make sure I stamp these twice because this watercolor paper has a little bit of texture and I want to make sure I get a nice impression. Now, Jen was really the inspiration behind this card today. She loves playing with distress and watercolor techniques with them, and it is not something I normally do. So I decided to kind of embrace that and give it a try. But I was also inspired to create this card and make it Mr. Harley and my puppy Penny. who passed away a few years ago. It's always hard to create a card for our friends that are sympathy cards or when something terrible has happened in their life. And my way of approaching that is to make something bright and happy, not something that says, here is my sympathy, but I feel like if you make it bright and happy and it brightens their day, that accomplishes a lot more than I'm sorry for your loss. So that is the idea and the theory behind today's card. So Penny was a red short-haired dachshund. So I'm using some browns here to color her in. I think I ended up using some tea dye and some vintage photo for the darker browns. And I'm not going to worry about the other dog because I will be cutting these little couples apart. And I like that when I got it a little bit too dark, I could just kind of pick it up with my brush. And if I needed to add some more, I can pick it up directly from the pencil. Next, I needed to color Mr. Harley, and I did pull up some pictures so I knew kind of where his black spots are because I'm not too familiar. And I was trying to look at my photograph while I added these black soot little areas to this little cat. And then I'm going to take a really small watercolor brush and just a little bit of water. I wanted to make sure that I didn't have too much water on my brush. And then I'm just going to smooth out those black spots on Mr. Harley. I want to make sure I don't get any into that white area because he is a very white and black kitty. And then I'm going to pull out my Kitsch Flamingo pencil and pick up a little bit of that pink from the pencil and add that to the inside of his ears. And then I also decided to add some little pink cheeks because pink cheeks are just so cute on little critters. I tried to add a little pink cheek to Penny as well, but it didn't show up quite as well on the brown. But there's a little bit of rouge there on her cheek. Once these are dry, I will use the coordinating dies to cut each of the little animal couples out. And then now I'm going to cut them apart. So I'm going to cut right around the foot and then I'm going to cut really close to the nose. I don't want to leave any white on the front of that puppy's face. For the cat, I'm just going to kind of cut down that cat that's on the left because I want a little bit of paper left over to attach these two together. So that will be where I add my glue, is on the cat that I cut off. And then what I like to do is to try to line up the images to where it looks like the lines kind of continue on to the image I'm adding. Now, once I got these together, I felt like I needed to trim off a little more white right on the front edge of the dog's face so that it did not cover up any of the cat. And now I think it looks perfect, like they were meant to be together the whole time. Now I need to make a little bit of grass for them to sit on. So I am doing another technique where I've smushed my mowed lawn distress ink pad onto my glass mat and added some water. Then I'm just adding it to this piece of watercolor paper. I'm also adding some Lucky Clover so that I have some different greens in there. And I was really just kind of playing. I didn't really have a plan as to what this really needed to look like. I just knew I needed it to be a darker green than what I had used on my flower garden backdrop. And so I was just kind of playing with this. I did add some splatters right here and I realized that that kind of wasn't the look I was looking for because it was still wet. So I'm going to kind of blend those back out. Then you'll see I'm going to dry this completely first and then add my splatters for texture. So now I've smushed a little more of that Lucky Clover onto my glass mat and I'll pick this up with a smaller brush and add some splatters. So now I have some nice texture to my grass. I'm going to make sure this is completely dry and then I will use a stitched hillside to cut it out. And I'm using the one that is very arched, which I actually don't use that often, but I wanted these two to look like they were sitting up on top of a hill. So I'll just hold this in place with a little bit of low tack tape and run that through my die cut machine and then also trim it down. It was a little wider than it needed to be. So now I have a little hill for my dog and cat to sit on. Now, before I assemble anything, I want to add my sentiment. And I'm just going to layer my pieces together in my MISTI and add my magnets. They're all kind of warped a little bit because we've used water and they've gotten wet, but that's okay. I'll just use my magnets to hold them down nicely, and then I'll add my sentiment that says, "You are my rainbow on a cloudy day." And this is from the My Rainbow stamp set. And I want these centered up in the sky above my little critter couple. So I've removed all those pieces that are not glued down yet. I'm holding my cloud piece down, and then I am stamping this in some VersaFine ink. I think that this gives a really crisp sentiment, and I'm also going to do a little bit of watercoloring to that word rainbow, and this works for watercoloring as well, just like jet black. So I've pulled out all of those same colors that I used to watercolor my rainbow flower garden backdrop. And luckily, I also have 7 letters in the word rainbow, so each one of these letters can be one of those colors from that border. So I'm just adding a little bit of the color to the top of each letter, and then I'm going to pull out that teeny tiny watercolor brush that I used before, and I'm going to blend those colors down to the bottom of the letters, kind of giving them a fade to a lighter color at the bottom. You do want to be really careful that you don't get too much water, which is why I'm using this teeny tiny brush and making sure that I kind of brush off the excess water because I don't want too much. I want to have nice control in those really small letters. But I think that this gives it such a beautiful look to have those open letters match the outside border of the card. Now I can start to assemble everything. I have some tape runner on the back of this, and I'm adding some liquid glue as well. Because we added lots of water to this piece of watercolor paper, it is a little warped, but this will make it nice and flat as I glue it down to my card base. I'm doing the same with my grass, and I'm just adding an acrylic block till that glue sets, which doesn't take too long. Now for my flower garden backdrop, I've added some thin foam strips around all 4 sides, also some little pieces to some of the solid leaves, and I'm going to put this on here to where it is popped up off the background and gives us some dimension, and I think this is a really fun look. I will add some foam squares to my little dog and my cat as well and pop them up right on that grassy hill. And of course, we need a little tiny die cut heart from guava cardstock above our cute little friends. Now to add some glitter, I am going to combine my glitters today, and this is a technique that Jen actually used in the Under the Sea class that I did with her. So I'll add my stickles. I added a little to that heart, but I'm also adding some to the border. Along the bottom, just randomly on the leaves and the flowers. And then I'm going to put some chunky glitter on top. This will stick to the Stickles glitter glue and we get this really amazing glittery shine. Now I'm continuing on with the stickles on up the sides, and I'm just leaving the chunky glitter at the bottom, which is kind of cool because it looks like the bottom is a little more sparkly and eye-catching, and then it kind of fades up to a little more subtle glitter up the sides, and I really love the way that this turned out. And then here is my finished card, and I just love the way it turned out. I had a lot of fun playing with some different watercolor mediums. We used the Corinne markers, we used the watercolor pencils, and I hope this has inspired you to break out some of those supplies you don't use very often and give them a try. I'll be sending this card to Jen, and hopefully it will brighten her day and let her know I'm thinking about her. Thank you so much for watching today. Have an amazing day. Bye.